The name Robert Monroe hit the courtroom like a thunderclap. In the trial's final week, prosecutors unveiled evidence that blindsided everyone. They revealed encrypted emails traced back to Robert Monroe's fiancée, Dr. Lillian Hayes, a respected psychologist who had quietly testified earlier in the trial as a character witness. At first glance, Lillian seemed like the supportive partner, standing by Robert during his turmoil. But the emails told a different story. In them, Lillian wrote to Torres directly, "Make sure it looks clean. He needs to be gone. Robert will never be free until his brother is out of the way. I'll make sure Eleanor and Rachel are on board. They're desperate enough to listen." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. It was Lillian, not Robert, not Eleanor, not Rachel, who had seen the bigger picture. She had manipulated every piece of the puzzle, feeding Robert's desperation, fueling Eleanor's anger, and pushing Rachel's fear until they all converged on one horrific solution. She wasn't just a bystander, she was the mastermind. Despite Robert's testimony, the evidence against Eleanor and Rachel was now undeniable. Eleanor's recorded tapes showed her negotiating with Torres. Rachel's bank withdrawal and her handwritten note tied her directly to the conspiracy. And Robert's own words placed both women at the heart of the plan. Eleanor's defense crumbled. Rachel's tears in the gallery did little to sway the jury. Both women were now seen as co-conspirators, one providing the motive, the other providing the money. Yet the case still felt incomplete. Because while Eleanor and Rachel had acted and Robert had enabled, someone else had been pulling the strings in the shadows. When confronted, Robert cracked. Under oath, he admitted he had introduced Torres to Eleanor Carter months before the murder. "He was pressuring me," Robert confessed, his voice trembling. "He said if I didn't bring him business, the debt would come due, one way or another." So Robert, cornered, had told Torres about his brother's messy divorce, about the custody battle, about Eleanor's rage. I didn't think she'd take it that far," Robert stammered. "I just thought maybe she'd blow off steam." But then Rachel got involved. And suddenly, it was all happening. The gallery erupted. So Robert had been the bridge, the man who connected Eleanor to the criminal underworld, who opened the door that led to David's death. But was he the true mastermind? Investigators quickly dug into Robert's past, and what they unearthed was explosive. Robert Monroe, the quiet, grieving brother, was drowning in gambling debt. For years he had borrowed from loan sharks across Miami, chasing high-stakes poker dreams that never materialized. By the summer of 2016, he owed more than $200,000 to men with little patience for excuses. Phone records revealed Robert had been in touch with Michael Torres, the same middleman linked to Eleanor and Rachel. At first, it seemed like Robert had merely been desperate for money. But then detectives uncovered a chilling detail. One of Torres's men had written Robert's name in a ledger next to the words, "Job referral." Until that moment, David's younger brother had been little more than a footnote in the trial. Soft-spoken, private, Robert had stood at the periphery of his brother's life. He rarely appeared in family photos, rarely visited Ridgeview, and when David was murdered, he issued a brief, sorrowful statement before retreating into silence. But now, the defense was pointing a finger squarely at him. Prosecutors argued that Lillian's motive was chillingly clear. She was set to marry Robert, but his life was shackled by debt and overshadowed by his more successful brother. David's very existence was a barrier, not just to Robert's future, but to hers. If David was gone, Robert inherited part of the Monroe estate. The debt collectors would be appeased with sudden funds, and Lillian, finally, could shape Robert into the man she wanted. She orchestrated it like therapy, Prosecutor Daniel Keene thundered. She preyed on every weakness in that family, turning grief, rage, and desperation into weapons. On the last day of testimony, as the jury sat wide-eyed, the prosecution played one final piece of evidence. A voicemail left on Michael Torres's burner phone just days before the murder. The voice was calm, measured, unmistakably hers. "This isn't about Eleanor. This isn't about Rachel. This is about finishing what we started." David Monroe must not live to see another week. It was the smoking gun. The courtroom gasped. Robert buried his face in his hands. Eleanor broke down for the first time, sobbing uncontrollably. Rachel fainted in the gallery. And Lillian Hayes, sitting stone-faced at the back of the courtroom, simply smiled. The jury convicted Eleanor Carter and Rachel Carter of conspiracy to commit murder, but it was Lillian Hayes who was indicted as the true mastermind of the Hollow Pines killing. As marshals led her away, reporters shouted questions, but she remained silent, her lips curved in a faint, chilling grin. Her final words, whispered to Robert as she passed him, would haunt everyone in the courtroom. "You would have thanked me, eventually." And with that, the story of the Hollow Pines murder ended. Not with the vengeful grandmother, not with the embittered ex-wife, but with the woman no one suspected. The mastermind hiding in plain sight. Thank you for watching. What are your thoughts about this story?